Well, good morning, Riverside. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Excited for part 2 of our series, Ups and Downs. First, it was really cool watching that video because Chad Nelson, our missionary in the Dominican Republic, he and I, just a few years ago when we were in college, worked at Auto Magic Car Wash in Springfield, Missouri together. So the last time the guys went down there, they got all kinds of stories about me as we worked together, so we've come a long way. So he does some great work there, really cool. And it's funny, he and I, Chad and I, when we worked, and as we were, it was a full service car wash, you know, the cars would come off the tracks, and then we would have our little towels and, you know, making the cars look really, really pretty, hoping we might just have a little tip for college, you know, as college students. And but along the way, one of the things we both loved was basketball and college basketball, and that's what we were usually talking about. I enjoy that, and that season's starting up. And as I was thinking about this for this message, it inspired the message and the message title, which is Take the Shot. You can follow along in your app there. I was thinking back to when my daughter was playing YMCA basketball. And as a dad who loves basketball, and I love to watch it, but I also like to be very interactive with the games I'm watching, including my kids. And my daughter was playing in this game, and I think she was 3rd or 4th grade, and the team we were playing had a player on the team that I wanted to just go to the coach and say, can we see a birth certificate? Because this girl looks like she's 7th grader. She was a giant, and you know, all of us parents were like, come on, this can't be. You know, she was blocking shots everywhere. And my daughter was really good at stealing the ball, and she stole the ball and started going down for a fast break. She was all by herself, at least for the first 5 or 6 steps, but then, you know, the 7-footer that was on the other team was catching up, and along the way, I was like, you know, drive and lay it up, you know, dribble and lay it up, dribble, lay it up, and I said that about 5 times in a row, and I was in the middle of the court, so just on the other side of the middle of the court, and she could hear my voice, and about to the time where she was about this, you know, with me, I saw this girl's going to catch up, and by the time she gets to the basket. So in my instructions, I was like, you know, drive, lay up, drive and lay up, drive and lay up. And then I just made an abrupt switch and said, pass the ball, pass the ball, pass the ball. And no joke, she came to like a jump stop and turned for a second and looked at me like, and I was like, pass, you know, she passed it, the other kid laid it up, and I just remember that distinctly, that moment. And as I look back at that, honestly, I was afraid for her to take the shot. I was afraid for her to take the shot and get blocked. I had that moment of fear, and it took over. I didn't want her to miss. And one person we're looking at in this series is a man named Peter. He was one of the 12 apostles. Very vocal. He was definitely a leader. And Peter was rarely afraid to take a shot. He was always out there taking the first step. Last week, Bridget, if you missed her message, she talked about this, him stepping out of the boat. You know, Peter was one of the first to follow Jesus. He was one of the first to obey. He was the first to walk on water. He was the first to get really afraid and start to sink and get saved by Jesus. He was the first, if you look at the story, and some of these stories we're going to be looking at the next couple of weeks, is Jesus is being arrested, and he's the first to draw his sword, and he cuts a guy's ear off. So lots of firsts for Peter. He was also, you know, the first disciple to deny that he knew Jesus after Jesus was arrested. So all these things, you look at him, and our first inclination is like, man, Peter's always putting his foot in his mouth. He's always making these really bold moves that are kind of stupid. But the reality is, we have to kind of step back and admire the fact that he was bold. He was a bold follower of Jesus. He wasn't afraid to take a shot. And I want to look at that because even though he took the wrong shot sometimes, or he took one at the wrong time or in the wrong way, Peter was bold, and he was always taking shots. And because of that, he experienced more ups and downs than any of the other disciples. And I want us to take a look at it from that lens, because you should also be experiencing ups and downs in your faith journey. You should. Because if you're active and you're doing things, you're taking a shot. If you're taking a shot by walking across the room to talk to somebody in your workplace about your faith, if you're taking a shot with generosity, responding to what we're talking about one day to feed the world, if you're taking a shot with a dream you believe God's put on your heart, if you're taking a shot by saying, okay, I need to step up and I need to serve here, I need to get involved in the mission. If you're doing these things, as a result, as you step out with your faith, you're going to have some ups and downs. But if you're passive and you don't do anything, you don't say anything, and you try to play it safe, well, it'll just be kind of like flatline, and not much will be happening. And so I want to look at Peter's life through this lens, because I really believe God wants to challenge us. Our journey of following Jesus is a faith journey. And faith requires that we trust God, and we step out, and we take risks, and we speak boldly, and we take steps, hopefully wise steps. So I want to look at how do we do this, and how can we learn from Peter's moments of taking a shot. And we're going to look at 3 of them. One of them was a really great shot, and 2 of them not so great. And we'll see why. So here's the first one, Mark chapter 8, verses 27 through 30. Now in the Gospels are the stories of Jesus' life. And they're told in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 4 individuals that some were, like John, was sharing everything he saw individually. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke all gathered some of these different accounts. And so we have the same story through 4 different lenses. We're going to mainly look at Mark, and this is what Mark tells us. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. At that point, it wasn't Jesus' time to go to the cross, so he was being cautious with his disciples about spreading this news. Peter's best shot, though, was not his own. This is one of his best shots right here. Here, the disciples being asked, "Who do you say that I am?" But first, notice they say, well, some are saying this, some are saying that. Some are saying you're a prophet. Now, who do you say that I am? In our journey of faith, the first step to say yes to following Jesus means we stop listening to what other people are saying, and you start to own your faith. You own it. You forget about the noise and the crowd and what the crowd is saying about Jesus and Christianity, and you begin to own your faith. This is what Jesus was asking his disciples to do. And Peter, the first to step up and say, "I believe you're the Messiah. I believe you're the Messiah." This is one of Peter's best moments, and it wasn't because he worked harder or because he achieved perfection or he mastered discipleship. This powerful moment was a moment of revelation. It was revealed to him. Here's what we find in Matthew 16:17, which follows his account of this. It says, Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." I believe God wants to reveal things to us. God wants to open our eyes, open our hearts to the things he's doing around us and what he wants to do in us. He wants to reveal more of himself to you. And it isn't by you working harder to make that happen. It is by making yourself available. Making yourself available to God. Spending time with him. God wants to speak to you. He wants to show you things, and he speaks to people in different ways. He may speak to you through a family member, another follower of Jesus. He may speak to you as you're reading scripture, and we encourage you to do so. We have free Bibles available for you. There's reading plans as well that you can go on the app. And it's during those moments, and I've had so many conversations over the years with people that said, when I was reading the Bible, it was like it came alive. It was like God was talking to me. God wants to show up big in your life. You have to take that first step. Making yourself available and realizing, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this by myself. I can't do this life on my own. And Peter's best shot was not his own. God wants to show up big in your life. As we move forward, we're going to look at two things, two moments that Peter took a shot that weren't so good. Okay? These shots were like, if you're watching a basketball game and somebody throws up a shot and it hits off the back iron or it hits off the backboard, we call that a brick, right? I think I heard somebody say brick. You know, when I was playing ball, you throw it up. It was almost like you'd save face if you threw up a shot. And you're like, this is going to be bad. Brick. If you call it yourself, then it's like, yeah. Well, but if you don't, it's like people are, boo, that was terrible. All right? So for Peter, he has a couple of these brick moments, all right? And we're going to look at them. So we're also in Mark chapter 8, continuing. Mark and Luke actually put these stories close together. So they at least happen in the same, somewhat in the same time frame. It says, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed after 3 days and rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, and he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. So we went from a really great moment to get behind me, Satan. Wow. This is a big missed shot. And this is one of his worst shots, his worst moments. Peter's worst shot, though, was a selfish one. This was a selfish one, and I'm going to unpack that here just a little bit by reading on as you continue to read. And this is a good principle as you're looking at Scripture and you're wondering, well, what does this mean? You keep reading and you zoom out a little bit. What's the context here? Why would Jesus tell his own disciple, get behind me, Satan? What's going on here? As we continue to read, it says, then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in his adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with his holy angels. So, he turns after saying this, and I'm sure the disciples are like, man, Peter, what just happened? Why did he call you that? Why is he rebuking you? And why is he telling us that he's going to have to suffer and die? Jesus had to suffer and die to pay the penalty for sin, for all of us, which he did on the cross. He was trying to tell them this, and yet the disciples didn't want to hear this. They had in their mind this idea that here they were following the Messiah, and the Messiah was going to save the world in a different way. He was going to become a king, and he was going to rule, and he was going to get rid of the Roman Empire. No, there was a much bigger plan, and that plan stretched way beyond what they could see and way beyond that time. It was for all time. Jesus was talking to them, but he's also talking to us, what he was going to do was go to the cross and pay for our sins because we are broken. We are sinners. We were born into a sinful and broken world, and we need a Savior. And so he's trying to explain this, but Peter stops. He stops. And he says, Jesus, you can't do this. You can't say this. Why is he doing this? Why is he stopping Jesus? And it says he rebukes Jesus. He's correcting Jesus, who he just said was the Messiah. That's a bold move. Why is he doing this? Because here's the reality. Peter heard this, hearing Jesus say, my future is the cross. And the cross is something we wear around our necks now. You see that as a piece of jewelry, and it's a great symbol of sacrifice and love. At that time, it was a horrific symbol of death and torture. And so, as Peter's hearing what Jesus is saying, I have to go do this, Peter's saying, no, you don't. Why is he saying this? Because if the cross was in Jesus' future, the cross was in the follower's future. Peter's saying, if you go there, we may not be far behind. I don't know about this suffering stuff you're talking about. I don't know about this. So when Jesus turns to everybody, the crowd, and he pulls all the disciples and he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. What it means to be a follower of Jesus is we have to lay down our life and say, Lord, you can have it. I want to live for you, and I lay down me and my desires, and they take second place. You're now first in my life. This is the hard part of being a follower of Jesus. But it's when we take that step of faith and when we realize, hey, I'm broken. I no longer want to live for me because you know what? Living for me kind of makes me miserable. If we're honest with ourselves, spend a lot of time thinking about you, doing for you what you want to do, and nobody else, and where does that get you? Pretty miserable. And so Jesus is saying, this is the way. This is the way. So we want to look at one more thing. If we go to the next chapter, we have another moment where Peter takes a shot, and this is after a really unique and amazing experience. And we're going to look at this. This is called the Transfiguration. And we're going to look at this story. I'll unpack it a little bit. It says, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up on a high mountain where they were alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Elijah and Moses, Elijah was a prophet, Moses being the leader of Israel. They had since died, went into eternity, but here they appear. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, this is my son, whom I love, listen to him. Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. This is Peter's weakest shot. Actually, this little parenthesis here, he didn't know what to say because they were so frightened. So he was like, let's just build some houses up here and let's just stay here forever. That was his, hey, this is so amazing. Let's not leave here. You guys should have your own little temples. And Peter's weakest shot was a fearful one. The reason why he said this, he was afraid. He was like, what do I say? What do we do? And the reality is, his big mistake was he put Elijah and Moses on the same level as Jesus, the Messiah, saying, why don't the 3 of you be right here? So as we look at this moment, fear overtook him, not knowing what to say, not knowing what to do. But in that last moment, Jesus, it says, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. You see, that's the message. That was the message for Peter, James, and John. Now, look only at Jesus. You know the past leaders. You know the Old Testament. You know these stories and these faith legends of faith. Yes, we learn from them, but now we only follow Jesus. Only follow Jesus. You know, fear and selfishness, these things that kind of took over for Peter, they are things that we struggle with every day. Every day, it has something in us where we have to wrestle with one of these things. And there's other things as well. Fear takes different forms. Anxiety, being timid, not having any confidence. Selfishness, also many different forms. Whether it's with our time, with our talents, with our treasures. Both of these things are things that we wrestle with in our faith journey. When I was thinking about this and thinking about this message, I thought about a short documentary I watched recently about a man who was given an opportunity to take a shot at the ACC basketball tournament for $1 million. A half-court shot. I want to show you just a quick video clip of this right now.
Scott, when you are ready, take your shot for $1 million. Now, Scott, you told me the day before the shot that you knew that you really probably had almost no chance to make it.
That's right. I didn't have any grand illusions of doing that.
But nonetheless, it didn't deter you at all from feeling like you still had that chance.
Well, that's true. I'm going by the Jimmy V creed, never give up. So I thought there's no reason for me to give up. I'm telling people, if it doesn't look good for you, just quit. So I thought, I've got to go out there, be an example, have a little courage, take the shot. If people don't like it or it goes bad, I'm not worried about that. I'm just concerned with me and the example I can show to people. Let's face it, making a shot from half court's not that likely for a guy that's even in his 20s or 30s that's maybe been playing some ball. I'm not that. I'm in my 50s. Haven't played in a long time. Probably didn't have a good shot at it for that reason, but then there's other reasons on top of that that just didn't seem like it was going to be likely, but I wasn't going to not take a shot. I mean, it's 1 in a million, take a shot.
That's what some people asked me on Twitter when they were starting. I saw comments about the shot. Mm-hmm. They wondered, why would he even sign up? Why would he enter the contest if he knew he wouldn't be able to do it? What would you say to people that are asking that?
I would say that this trip alone, just being here, getting tickets to the ACC tournament, getting taken care of by Raycom, hotel, all things taken care of, and my wife and I get to come on a wonderful vacation, regardless of $1 million shot. That's fantastic for us. She's a North Carolina fan. I'm an NC State fan. We've pulled for them for a long time, and we just love being here. The atmosphere has been fantastic. The people have taken great care of us, and we just love being here. The $1 million shot, that was an extra. If that happened, for goodness sake, we had that on the top. That was a cherry on the top.
You get the sense that perhaps you're inspiring some people?
I hope so. I hope so. It's not necessarily my ultimate goal, but, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is my goal. I would love for people to be inspired. If I can make an impact on people's lives, if I can help people, the problem I had, and I got a kidney transplant, first time it had been done in the world. That's no credit to me. I didn't do it, but the doctors found a way to do it. They took care of it. You know, it's a historical first. I just happen to be the recipient. If that's inspiring to other people and other people's lives can be affected by that, fantastic.
And maybe one day you'll take another shot.
I hope so. I hope so. Thanks.
You know, this is an interesting story. His name's Scott Park, and he finally alluded to why he couldn't make that shot. So he has a rare blood disease, and he was like the first one with the disease that he had to actually have a successful kidney transplant in the world. And when he was, his name was pulled from hundreds of thousands of people that entered it, he knew, I'm not going to make this shot. And he was actually ridiculed on social media once it was posted by a reporter. And that reporter then started digging deeper. to find out, well, what really is the story here? And they did an extended documentary on his life. And it has inspired people. Why? Even though he knew that $1 million probably not going to happen. He didn't have enough strength. He was like, hey, maybe, just maybe I can inspire somebody. I'm still going to take this shot. I think for us, as we have a struggle with fear, selfishness, and the list maybe is a little bit longer for you in your faith journey, I think for us, we can learn from a story like that, and we can certainly learn from Peter. You know, this story here that we just showed you led to an inspirational story. He was a person of faith. I believe he passed away about 3 or 4 years after that, battling this disease. But millions of people saw his courage and his fight. What would have happened if he said, no, I don't want to get up there and take a shot that I'm going to miss? Nobody would have ever seen his story. Here's what we must remember about Peter's story. With all his failures, with all his gaffes, with all his shake my head moments, when you're reading about Peter, which I do, when I read it, I'm like, man, how could you do that? Why would you say that? What were you thinking? Here's the reality. Peter's failures didn't define him, they refined him. They were all preparation. All these moments that I'm sure afterwards he was like, man, I regret doing that. I regret saying that. Why did I pull my sword out when Jesus was about to be arrested? Why did I do that? Why did I just speak up and say, let's build 3 shelters up here on the top of the mountain when I knew we're not going to do that? I was just afraid. Maybe fear shouldn't be the thing that shapes my decisions anymore. You see, all these things, they refined him. Today, some of you are afraid. You're afraid to rebuild. You're hesitant to step out, maybe take a risk in your relationship with God. You're scared maybe of what people might think if you start being bold in your workplace or in your neighborhood about your faith in Jesus. You're unsure about maybe starting a new relationship or committing to a long-term one. Maybe you're afraid to start something new. Maybe you're afraid to stay put. Whatever it is, I want you to know God in heaven wants you to trust him with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and let the peace of God that transcends all understanding rest on your heart in these decisions, that you would allow him to guide you as you step out, as you speak out, that you would trust him, and that you would know that yes, there will be some steps and missteps and things that you should say, and maybe some things that you step out and say and think, man, I should have said it differently. Okay, it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey. I wanted to just unpack 3 things on how to take a shot that kind of flow out of this scriptures and a few other scriptures. If you're at that place and you're afraid and you're not sure, how do I step out? What do I need to say? What is God calling me to do? I'm not sure, but I know I can't just sit back and be a spectator. One of the things you may have heard here, and we've talked about it, we talked about it new to know, and in our next steps classes, is to be a follower, not just a fan. You got to get in the game. So how do we do this? Well, first step is to give up something. Talking about ups and downs, Jesus said, pick up your cross. How can you pick up your cross when you're carrying so much else? Some of the things are material things. Some of the things are dreams that you just know they're not godly dreams. They're just things that you're chasing after that are making you miserable. What are the things that God is saying, you need to lay that down and start chasing after and walking after the things I'm calling you to? Maybe it's habits that for too long, or thought patterns. Maybe it's giving up this, I'm going to work and achieve this for myself journey that God never called you to. He is a gracious, we are saved by grace, not by works. Second is to get tunnel vision. I love this phrase. They no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. That's it. That's what he's always calling us to do. We have a world that is flooding us with messages that we're hearing and seeing all the time, and media. What can you do to develop really good tunnel vision? Only seeing Jesus. And then the last thing is that we would get down low and pray. Peter, in one of his letters, says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you." I know, easier said than done. But when we spend more time in prayer, humbling ourselves, on our knees, on our face before God, saying, "God, I cannot do this on my own. I want your help. I want you to show me. I want you to lead me. I want you to work in my life." You know, the interesting thing is the two big misses in Peter's life on the night that Jesus was arrested was, first, he took out his sword when Jesus never asked him to do that. And the second thing was something Jesus told him was going to happen, which is, "You're going to deny me 3 times on the night I'm arrested." Before those things happened, Jesus called the disciples and said, "Come with me into the garden and pray with me." After just a little bit, he went to check on the disciples, and what were they doing? I encourage you to make prayer a priority. If you're at that place where you're saying, I'm afraid, or yes, I admit I am too self-involved in my life, what does that mean? In January, I know it's a little far off, but it'll be here before you know it. We're going to be doing 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I encourage you to start marking your calendars for the second week of January to be a part of that. And how can I commit to prayer? But start now. How can I carve out 15 more minutes a day to talk to God? You know, as I was reflecting on this message and I wasn't sure how to end it, I just had this moment, God reminding me of my grandfather's funeral. My grandfather was a minister most of his life. His whole family came to know Jesus because of what they were called back then in the 20s were tent meetings, where they'd have these big tents and everybody would come in and listen to a man preach the gospel. And the whole family came to know Jesus in Wichita, Kansas because of a guy who put up a tent and invited people to come in and hear about Jesus. He was later called into the ministry, and he was pastoring churches all over Kansas. And one of those churches was in Garden City, Kansas. Who's been to Garden City? Anybody been to Garden City, Kansas? One person. And then there was one. All right. So, and this was one of his 3rd or 4th assignments in ministry. And in that church, he had a young minister that was 19 years old, and his name was Owen Carr. And Owen was at my grandfather's funeral, and I was talking to different people, and I knew of Owen Carr because he had become an evangelist and church planter and was well known. And what I didn't know was the impact that my grandfather had had on his life, because he had taken Owen under his wing. And after he'd been in youth ministry in the church for a little while, my grandfather knew, Owen was called to even greater things. And and Owen told me this story. He said, "I'll never forget when your grandfather came to me one day and said, when are you going to step out? You know God's calling you to be a pastor and maybe an evangelist." And we have a picture of him here. And Owen said, "I never forget what I told your grandpa. I told him, well, I'm just waiting on God." And my grandfather, without missing a beat, looked at him and said, "No, Owen, God's waiting on you. God's waiting on you." Owen Carr has served as a pastor, evangelist, district and national youth leader, television producer, fundraiser, general presbyter, college president, assistant district superintendent, And in his 80s, he helped plant a church in Missouri. He is now the age of 99 and still preaching at the funeral home in which he resides. Because he's always taking shots. I don't know who this message is for, but I have a feeling for many of you, you're somewhere in this. Whether it's in your faith life and your faith journey here at Riverside. Maybe it's for one day to feed the world next week, and you're saying, man, I really want to be a part of that. I mean, we do this every year, and we were celebrating it. I don't know. That's a big step of generosity. Maybe it's praying this week and saying, okay, God, what kind of a shot do you want me to take? Whatever it is, the God of the universe created you with a purpose in mind. He's given you time, talents, and treasure. And the worst thing that you can do with it is to be like that player at the end of the game. If you've ever watched a basketball game where they're passing around, it's the last 10 seconds, and it's the person that's holding the ball when it's and you didn't even get a shot up. God wants you to step out in faith. He does. Yes, with wisdom, with prayer, God will lead you in the right direction with whatever it is you're holding on to, not sure what to do with. I want to pray for you right now. If you bow your heads with me just for a moment. First, if you're here today and hearing this news that Jesus went to the cross for you to pay for your sins, and we are all sinners. We have all fallen short of the standard. We live in a broken world, but Jesus made a way. He shed his blood to pay for our sins for all time. And if you're here and you're saying, I need to take this first step, this first shot of saying, yes, I want to follow Jesus. If that's you, and you say, I want to agree with this prayer, agree with it right now. Jesus, I believe you're the Son of God. I believe you died for my sins and rose again on the third day. And Jesus, just agree with this prayer. I give you my life. I want to live for you from this day forward. If that was you for the first time, or maybe you're saying this prayer for the first time in a long time, just slip up your hand and say, that's me. Yes, yes, yes. I see that hand, yes. Thank you, Jesus, for these first steps. And Lord, I pray, God, for everyone here with whatever fear or selfish things that you're wrestling with, the things that you know, I can't keep holding on to this. Whether it's the thing that you need to lay down or the thing that you need to trust God. And just like throwing a basket up and saying, God, would you take this where it needs to go? Whatever that is, if you're saying, I need wisdom, just slip up your hand and say, that's me. I need wisdom for what to do next. Yes, lots of hands. Give us wisdom for the next steps, for what steps we need to take, what shots we need to take, and trust you with the rest. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's worship together.